The footage you are about to see was captured by photographer's mate, 2nd Class Charles W. Bossert of the United States Coast Guard on February 19, 1945, D-Day for the attack on the island of Iwo Jima. Bossert was aboard LST-761 of Tractor Group Baker. These particular LSTs were crewed by members of the United States Coast Guard. These LSTs carried LVTs, which would carry the Marines to the beaches. The LST that Bossert was aboard was carrying Marines of E Company, 2nd Battalion, 23rd Marines of the 4th Marine Division. He landed with them on Yellow 1 Beach during the assault phase. We are very lucky this footage exists, as both Bossert's still and movie cameras were, quote, casualties of the D-Day landing. The damage to his cameras would come later once he had worked his way on shore, which means he was able to capture footage of the assault waves going in and the various other vessels and ships supporting the landings. Example you can see there, PC-578, which was the Yellow Beach control vessel. The LVTs of 761 were part of the early stages of the landings. It's noted that all of the LVTs were off of LST-761 by 0750, ready to be launched with the assault, which came around 0900 hours. Bossert also got footage of the battleship USS Tennessee, which was providing fire support for the landings. The Tennessee was tasked with firing 1,550 5-inch rounds in the area around Yellow Beach. The ship's crew was also tasked with firing 190 14-inch rounds at positions around Mount Suribachi, which Bossert was able to get lots of good footage of during the run-in to the beach. It's an amazing thing that we have this footage from inside the LVT as the Marines head toward the beach. Here again you can see Mount Suribachi clearly being targeted due to the heavy amount of smoke that you can see in this shot. He was able to capture some footage of what appears to be an older shipwreck along the beach at Iwo Jima. If you know anything about this shipwreck, which looks like it's been there quite a long time, please let me know in the comments down below. Of course, along the water's edge is the famed black sands of Iwo Jima that the Marines had to contend with coming ashore. As you can see, there is some sort of explosion or fire being directed somewhere towards the beach as the Marines try to take cover and keep low as they move their way inland. You can also see just a little bit of Mount Suribachi towards the middle of the frame. You can also see them jumping out of the LVT here, which is just fascinating to see in a combat situation. Bossert wrote a letter about his experiences on the beaches on D-Day. And again, remember, these are his words I'm quoting, and he's using language very common during the war. And I quote, "Then all hell broke loose, and for 2 hours the Japs seemed to be throwing everything they had our way. Mortars through a large, high, slow-moving shell, which when landing explodes with terrific force. One of these monsters picked my recently vacated shell hole, and I suffered my first casualty of the morning, my Eastman. I discarded all extra equipment and dug a little hole right beside me for my movie camera and my exposed film. By this time, shells were dropping every 30 seconds or so. We hugged the ground, trying to make ourselves as small as possible. Then it hit, about 5 or 10 yards ahead of us, and a little to the right. The shock felt like some huge force had struck you every place at the same instant. It was minutes before any of us could move. When I finally looked up, my movie camera was lying right beside my head with a large jagged hole directly through the center, and the film was all full of holes, but I am intact. So that is why I am enclosing some very poor news stories, hoping that one of the writers can make something out of them, and thus all would not be lost." And it's noted in the history this comes from, Bossert, in spite of his tough luck, delivered some very good stills of the action on Iwo. I know I said this before, but having this footage of the Marines moving across the beach and on the island while they're being shelled and shot at is nothing short of amazing. To see what they had to do to get towards their objective near the airfield is intense. You can see the knocked out LVTs across the sand, as well as Marines trying to keep low as possible as they move their way forward. Also, there were several photos taken of Bossert on Iwo Jima itself. The first here seemingly before his film camera was destroyed, as he described, as there's seemingly no damage to the covering for the camera itself. In this photo, you can see that the case for the film camera has a hole towards the center of it, again, that he describes in his letter. This photo shows the extensive damage to the film camera. Such damage would definitely put the camera out of use and potentially destroyed much of the film that was contained within it, just like he talked about in his letter. Bossert continued to work in photography after the war and died in 1992.